In the cold vacuum of space where stars burn like distant campfires and entire civilizations rise and fall between heartbeats of cosmic time, there exists a simple truth that every species learns too late. Never underestimate the creatures that crawled out of gravity wells so deep they forged diamonds in their cores and oceans so violent they learned to harness lightning itself. The Galactic Council thought they knew war. They had fought the Cathari for 3 centuries, watched worlds burn under plasma bombardments, and seen entire star systems consumed by nanite swarms. But they had never met the species that turned their own planet's attempt to kill them into a game. They had never encountered the beings that looked at a world where everything was poison, predator, or plague, and decided to call it home when the desperate call went out across the galaxy. Send reinforcements, send anything, we're dying out here. They expected ships. They expected soldiers. They expected hope wrapped in metal and energy weapons. What they got was humanity, and the universe would never be the same. Commander Zethara's crystalline fingers trembled as she reviewed the casualty reports streaming across her holographic display. The command deck of the dreadnought Eternal Vigilance hummed with the desperate energy of a losing battle. Around her, officers from a dozen different species worked frantically at their stations, their various forms of stress, nervous chittering, color changes, pheromone releases, creating a symphony of impending defeat. Another supply convoy destroyed, reported Lieutenant Vexim, his scaled hide shifting from blue to deep purple. That's 17 this cycle. The Cathari hunters are picking us apart. Zethara's mandibles clicked in frustration. 3 months ago, the Galactic Council's 7th Fleet had been the pride of civilized space. 800 ships strong, representing 42 species, armed with the latest quantum torpedoes and shield technology. Now, barely 200 vessels remained operational, scattered across the Kepler Nebula in a desperate attempt to hold the line against the Cathari advance. The enemy was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Where other species waged war with strategy and honor, the Cathari brought only hunger. Their bioships weren't built. They were grown, evolved specifically for one purpose: consumption. They didn't want territory or resources. They wanted to devour every living thing in their path, transforming organic matter into more of themselves. Status on the evacuation of Proxima Colony? Zethara asked, though she dreaded the answer. 6 million souls still planet-side, came the reply from Communications Officer Nelara, her feathered crest flattened against her skull in distress. The civilian transports can't break through the Cathari blockade. Every ship we send gets absorbed. Absorbed. Such a clinical term for what actually happened. Zethara had watched through long-range sensors as Cathari bioships latched onto Council vessels like parasites. Within hours, the attacked ships would begin to change, their metal hulls growing organic protrusions, their crews transformed into something between living and machine, serving the Cathari collective with the memories and skills of their former lives intact but their will completely subsumed. Mom, Vexim's voice cracked slightly. The Admiralty is requesting another status update. What should I tell them? What could she tell them? That the greatest military alliance in galactic history was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that turned their own strengths against them. That every tactical advantage they possessed, superior numbers, advanced technology, strategic positioning, meant nothing against foes that adapted and evolved with each engagement? Tell them. Zethara began, then stopped. On her peripheral display, a new alert was flashing. What's that contact? Nalara's feathers rustled as she consulted her instruments. Long-range sensors are detecting something at the edge of the system. It's unusual. Unusual how? The energy signatures don't match any known Council or Cathari vessels. Multiple contacts, moving in formation. They're big, massive, actually, but they're not broadcasting any identification codes. For a moment, hope flickered in Zethara's chest. Reinforcements, perhaps? Some hidden Council fleet finally arriving to turn the tide? But even as the thought formed, she dismissed it. The Council had no hidden reserves. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was already committed to this desperate holding action. Get me a visual, she ordered. The main display shimmered, then resolved into a view of space that made every officer on the bridge fall silent. Emerging from the swirling gases of the nebula's edge came ships unlike anything in their databases. They were angular where Cathari vessels were organic, geometric where Council ships were curved. But most striking was their color, a dull gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them appear like tears in the fabric of space itself. By the void, whispered Vexim. Look at the size of those things. The lead vessel was enormous. easily 3 times the length of Zethara's dreadnought and twice as wide. Behind it came others of various sizes, from ships that dwarfed entire battle groups to smaller craft that still outsized most Council destroyers. They moved with a precision that spoke of advanced coordination systems, maintaining perfect formation despite their numbers. "How many ships are we looking at?" Zethara asked. Nalara's voice was barely audible. "Sensors are still counting, but over 3,000 confirmed contacts. And Commander, some of these readings, they're not just ships." "What do you mean?" "The largest vessels are showing energy signatures consistent with mobile construction facilities, weapons foundries, self-contained manufacturing systems. This isn't just a fleet, it's an entire industrial civilization moving through space." Before Zethara could respond, her communications console erupted in activity. The unknown fleet was broadcasting on all frequencies, their message cutting through the electronic warfare and jamming that had plagued Council communications for months. "Attention Council forces," came a voice speaking perfect galactic standard, though with an accent none of them recognized. "This is Admiral Chen Wei of the Seoul Defense Force, representing the United Earth Colonial Navy. We received your distress call. We're here to help." The bridge fell silent except for the background hum of life support systems. "Earth, Seoul." Zethara searched her memory banks, finally locating the reference. A small world on the far rim of Council space, inhabited by a recently contacted species called humans. She remembered reading the first contact reports. Bipedal mammals, technologically primitive, showing early promise but requiring centuries of development before they could contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. "Sir," Vexim's voice was carefully controlled. "Earth is listed as a Class 3 development world. According to our records, they've barely achieved faster-than-light travel. How could they possibly—" "I don't know," Zethara interrupted. "But right now, I don't care. Open a channel." The display flickered, revealing the interior of what was obviously an alien bridge. The being that appeared was roughly humanoid but smaller than most Council species, with pale skin and dark hair. What struck Zethara most were the creature's eyes, a startling blue color with an intensity that suggested sharp intelligence. "This is Commander Zethara of the Council's 7th Fleet," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Admiral Chen, your assistance is welcome, but I must warn you, the enemy we're facing is unlike anything in your databases. The Cathari don't just destroy, they consume and convert. If you're not prepared for—" Admiral Chen raised a hand, the gesture somehow conveying both respect and quiet confidence. "Commander, we've been monitoring your engagement for the past 72 hours. We know what we're dealing with. With respect, Admiral, I don't think you do. We've lost 600 ships to these creatures. They adapt to our weapons, convert our vessels, and turn our own people against us. This isn't a conventional military engagement. Something that might have been a smile crossed the human's features. Commander Zethara, my species spent 200,000 years learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and more numerous than we were. We turned persistence hunting into an art form. We domesticated predators that could tear us apart and learned to ride animals that could trample us. We looked at every poisonous plant, venomous creature, and hostile environment on our world and asked the same question: how can we make this useful?" The human paused, his expression growing serious. "The Cathari think they're apex predators because they can adapt and consume other species, but they've never met a species that spent millions of years being hunted by things scarier than they are. They've never fought creatures that learned to see being the underdog not as a disadvantage, but as a tactical opportunity." Despite everything, Zethara felt something she hadn't experienced in months: curiosity. "What exactly are you proposing?" "We're going to do what humans do best," Admiral Chen replied. "We're going to take something that's trying to kill us and find a way to make it work for us instead." Before Zethara could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout her ship. Long-range sensors were detecting massive Cathari movement. A biofleet at least twice the size of the human force was approaching from the inner system. "Admiral," she said urgently, "we're detecting a large enemy formation moving to intercept you. If you withdraw now—" "Negative, Commander. We didn't come this far to run from a fight." Admiral Chen's image flickered as his ship apparently shifted to combat readiness. "All Council vessels, please move to safe distance and observe. You're about to see how Earth handles an infestation." The human fleet began to change formation, their ships spreading out in a pattern that looked almost organic, like antibodies responding to an infection. As they moved, Zethara noticed something that made her breath catch. The human vessels weren't just repositioning, they were transforming. Weapon systems she hadn't even detected were emerging from hidden bays, the angular hulls were shifting, revealing that what she'd taken for solid construction was actually modular design. Ships were linking together in clusters, sharing power and computing resources, becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. How is this possible? Vexum whispered. The energy readings are off any scale I've seen. Admiral Chen's voice came over the comm again, but now he was speaking to his own fleet on an open channel that the Council ships could monitor. All units, you are weapons free. Remember the doctrine? Adapt, overcome, evolve. Show these things what 4 billion years of evolutionary pressure produces. The Cathari biofleet came into visual range, and Zethara felt the familiar chill of facing the enemy. The creature's ships were nightmarish amalgamations of flesh, metal, and technology, vessels that pulsed with unnatural life, bristling with weapons that had been grown rather than manufactured. Some were kilometers long, others small but numerous, all moving with the coordinated purpose of a single vast organism. They had adapted since the last engagement, as they always did. Their hulls now showed modifications designed to counter Council weapons, energy-dispersing surfaces, quantum-resistant armor, even what appeared to be jamming organs that disrupted targeting systems. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature star going nova. Cathari bioplasma tore through the void while the aliens' living torpedoes sought human targets with predatory intelligence. The human response was unlike anything Zethara had ever witnessed. Instead of the quantum torpedoes and particle beams she expected, the human weapons fired what looked like metallic seeds, thousands of them, launched from every human vessel in a coordinated barrage that filled space with a glittering cloud of projectiles. The Cathari seemed almost insulted by such a primitive attack. Their point defense systems evolved from organic processes that could intercept energy weapons, ignored the incoming metal fragments as harmless debris. That was their first mistake. The seed struck Cathari hulls and immediately began to change. What Zethara had taken for simple kinetic projectiles were actually sophisticated nanite packages, each one containing enough artificial intelligence to make tactical decisions and enough raw material to replicate itself dozens of times over. Within seconds, the Cathari ships were covered in what looked like metallic tumors. The growth spread across their hulls, interfacing with the bioship systems, but instead of being absorbed and converted as Cathari victims usually were, the nanites began to take control. Impossible, Nelara breathed. They're hacking biological systems? Admiral Chen's voice cut through their amazement. The Cathari aren't the first species to weaponize biological adaptation. On Earth we call that evolution, and we've been playing that game a lot longer than they have. The battle was turning into something beyond warfare. It was becoming a contest of competing evolutionary strategies. The Cathari ships tried to adapt to the nanite intrusion, growing new cellular structures to contain the infection. In response, the nanites evolved countermeasures, developing new strategies with each generation that reproduced inside the bioships. But the humans weren't finished. As the Cathari fleet struggled with the nanite assault, the human vessels launched their second wave attack. This time the weapons were recognizably destructive, but with a terrifying twist. Instead of trying to overwhelm Cathari defenses, the human weapons were designed to be absorbed. They're allowing their missiles to be captured, Zethara realized with growing horror and admiration. The Cathari bioships, operating on instinct bred over millions of years of successful conquest, began their standard absorption process. They engulfed the human weapons, breaking them down to incorporate their materials and technology. It should have been another victory, another step toward converting human vessels into extensions of the Cathari collective. Instead, the absorbed weapons activated from inside the bioships. But these weren't explosives. They were transformation engines designed to rewrite biological systems from within. The Cathari vessels began to change, their organic hulls shifting color and texture. Their weapon systems turned on other Cathari ships. Their coordination broke down as individual vessels found their higher brain functions overwritten by human programming. In less than 20 minutes, what had been the largest Cathari assault force ever assembled had become a chaotic mob of confused bioships attacking each other while human nanites continued to spread through their systems like a beneficial virus. The human fleet moved through the chaos with surgical precision, their weapons now targeting specific bioships with treatments designed to complete the conversion process. They weren't destroying the Cathari, they were curing them, transforming the bioships into something that retained their enhanced capabilities but served human purposes. Commander, Vexum's voice was filled with awe. Are we witnessing the birth of a new kind of warfare? Zethara watched as human technical teams began boarding converted Cathari vessels. Not as conquerors but as engineers, working alongside the transformed bioships to optimize their new configurations. It was a sight that challenged every assumption she had about combat, about species interaction, about the nature of conflict itself. Admiral Chen's imagery appeared on her screen, and now she could see the full bridge of his vessel. It was staffed not just by humans, but by what appeared to be converted Cathari bioforms working alongside human technicians. The integration was seamless, as if they had been designed to work together. "Commander Zethara," Admiral Chen said, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. "We've neutralized the immediate threat, but this is just the beginning. The Cathari Collective extends across dozens of systems. If we're going to end this war, we're going to need your help." "Our help?" Zethara felt a laugh bubbling up that was part hysteria, part relief. "Admiral, I think you have that backwards." The human's expression grew serious. "With respect, Commander, you're wrong. What you just witnessed isn't a victory. It's a proof of concept. The Cathari Collective will adapt to these tactics within days. If we're going to save the billions of lives at stake across the galaxy, we need the Council's resources, knowledge, and coordination capabilities." He paused, looking directly into her eyes through the screen. "But most importantly, we need species who understand that sometimes the best way to defeat a monster is to become something scarier." As if to emphasize his point, one of the converted Cathari bioships drifted past the main viewer. Its hull still pulsed with organic life, but now it bore human markings and moved with the precise coordination of the human fleet. It was beautiful, terrible, and completely beyond anything Zethara had thought possible. "What exactly are you asking of us?" she said finally. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time, Zethari saw something in that expression that reminded her why humans had been classified as coming from a death world. "We're asking you to help us take this war to the Cathari on a scale they never imagined. We're going to turn their greatest strength, their ability to consume and adapt, into the weapon that destroys them." The display shifted to show a galactic map, with red zones marking Cathari-controlled space. As Zethara watched, the map began to change, showing projected fleet movements and strategic targets. "We're not just going to defeat the Cathari," Admiral Chen continued. "We're going to transform them into the galaxy's greatest defense against any future threat that thinks consuming other species is a viable strategy." Looking at the scope of what the humans were proposing, Zethara felt a mixture of terror and hope that she suspected would define the rest of her career. "And if we refuse?" Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew harder. "Then you're welcome to return to your previous strategy of slowly losing while billions die. But Commander, I think you've seen enough to know that's not really an option anymore." He was right, and they both knew it. The game had changed fundamentally in the space of 20 minutes. The question now wasn't whether the Council would cooperate with humanity, but whether they could adapt quickly enough to keep up with a species that had just redefined the nature of interstellar warfare. "What do you need from us?" Zethara asked, knowing that her answer would be remembered as the moment the galaxy chose evolution over extinction. Admiral Chen's smile returned, warmer now, filled with the promise of shared victory. "Everything you've got, Commander, and trust that when this is over, the galaxy will be a safer place for every species in it." As the human fleet began to reorganize, incorporating the converted bioships into new configurations that shouldn't have been possible, Zethara realized that she was witnessing more than just a military engagement. She was seeing the emergence of something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that didn't just survive contact with a superior predator, but transformed the encounter into an opportunity for symbiosis. The war was far from over, but for the first time in months, Zethara began to believe it was winnable. The humans had arrived not just as reinforcements, but as teachers, showing the galaxy what it meant to turn disadvantage into strength and fear into fuel for innovation. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Cathari Collective was about to discover what every predator on Earth had learned over millions of years. Sometimes the prey evolves too. The transformation of the Proxima system from battlefield to laboratory took less than 48 hours. Admiral Chen had not been exaggerating when he called the human fleet a mobile industrial civilization. Zethara watched from the observation deck of her dreadnought as human constructor ships worked alongside converted Cathari biovessels to establish what they called integration centers throughout the system. "The scale of this operation defies belief," Vexim muttered, his scales shifting through a spectrum of colors that indicated deep confusion. "They're not just studying the Cathari technology, they're improving it." Indeed, what Zethara was witnessing challenged every assumption about technological development. The humans weren't simply reverse engineering Cathari bioships. They were engaging in real-time evolutionary acceleration, using artificial selection pressures to guide the living vessels toward more effective configurations. Dr. Sarah Chen, Admiral Chen's sister and the expedition's chief xenobiologist, had explained the process during their morning briefing. Where most species saw the Kethari bioships as alien and incomprehensible, humans recognized them as sophisticated biological machines operating on principles their own science had been exploring for centuries. The Kethari made one crucial error. Dr. Chen had said her enthusiasm infectious even across species barriers. They assumed that biological adaptation was inherently superior to technological advancement. But on Earth, we learned that the best solutions often come from combining both approaches. The results were already becoming apparent. The first generation of human-guided bioships retained their organic capabilities while gaining technological enhancements that multiplied their effectiveness. But more importantly, they were now communicating with their human crews through interfaces that went beyond simple mechanical control. Commander, Nell Era's voice interrupted Zethara's observations. Admiral Chen is requesting your presence aboard his flagship. He says the integration trials are ready to begin. Zethara felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The integration trials, the process by which human crews would attempt to form symbiotic relationships with converted Kethari bioships. It was either the most brilliant military innovation in galactic history or the most dangerous form of technological hybridization ever attempted. The shuttle flight to the human flagship Resilience gave Zethara her first close look at the transformed bioships. Up close, their evolution was even more remarkable. The organic hulls had developed new sensory organs that seemed designed for deep space navigation, while their weapon systems had reorganized into configurations that combined biological adaptability with technological precision. But it was the crews that truly amazed her. Through the transparent sections of the bioship's hulls, she could see humans working alongside what appeared to be Kethari biomechanical constructs. Not prisoners or slaves, but partners, each contributing their unique capabilities to the ship's operation. The Resilience itself was a monument to human engineering philosophy. Rather than the sleek curves favored by most spacefaring species, it was built like a three-dimensional puzzle, with modular sections that could be reconfigured for different missions. Docking bays opened like flower petals to accommodate vessels of various sizes, while the hull was covered in sensor arrays that gave it an almost insectoid appearance. Admiral Chen met her at the airlock personally, a courtesy that impressed Zethara. Despite commanding what was arguably the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, he moved without the rigid formality she expected from military leaders. Commander, thank you for coming. I wanted you to see this firsthand before we begin the major offensive operations. He led her through corridors that buzzed with activity. Human technicians worked alongside members of various council species, all apparently integrated into the human command structure without the bureaucratic friction that usually plagued multi-species operations. How are you managing the coordination? Zethara asked. In council fleets, interspecies cooperation requires extensive protocols and liaison officers. Admiral Chen glanced at her with what she was beginning to recognize as typical human amusement. We learned a long time ago that the best way to work with different species is to focus on shared goals rather than differences. Plus, necessity is a powerful motivator for cooperation. They entered what appeared to be the ship's primary integration chamber, a vast space where human technology and Kethari bioengineering had been merged into something that transcended both. At the center sat what looked like a living throne, its surface rippling with bioluminescent patterns that responded to the presence of the human seated within it. The volunteer was young by human standards, barely into what they called adulthood, but her eyes held the intense focus that Zethara had noticed in all the humans she'd met. More remarkably, she appeared to be in complete harmony with the bioship systems surrounding her, her movements synchronized with the organic rhythms of the vessel. Lieutenant Torres is our most successful integration pilot, Admiral Chen explained. She's been bonded with her bioship for 36 hours now, and the symbiotic relationship is exceeding all our projections. Bonded, Zethara felt a chill. You mean permanently? Not permanently, but deeply. The relationship requires mutual trust and adaptation. The bioship gains human creativity and strategic thinking, while the pilot gains access to biological systems that can adapt to threats faster than any technological response. Dr. Chen appeared at Zethara's side, seemingly materializing from the shadows with the quiet efficiency she was learning to associate with human scientists. The fascinating aspect is that both human and bioship are changed by the process. The pilot develops enhanced spatial awareness and reaction times, while the bioship gains access to human pattern recognition and tactical innovation. And the risks? Substantial. Dr. Epp, Shen admitted with characteristic human directness. Psychological integration with an alien consciousness is inherently dangerous. But the volunteers understand what's at stake. Lieutenant Torres spoke without opening her eyes, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the bioship's living systems. Commander Zethara, the integration process is unlike anything in your databases, but it's also unlike anything the Cathari have encountered. They evolved to consume and convert, but they never learned to truly cooperate. The young woman's eyes opened, and Zethara saw that they had changed. Still human, but now flecked with patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the bioship's life signs. This ship and I don't just work together, we think together. And when we encounter other Cathari vessels, we can communicate with them in ways they don't expect. Demonstrate, Admiral Chen said quietly. The integration chamber filled with a low harmonic that seemed to come from the bioship itself. But as Zethara listened, she realized it was more than sound. It was a form of communication that bypassed spoken language entirely, conveying meaning through tonal patterns and emotional resonance. That's a modified version of Cathari collective communication, Dr. Chen explained. But instead of the domination-submission dynamic they're used to, Lieutenant Torres is offering partnership. To a Cathari bioship that's been isolated from the collective, it's the difference between starvation and sustenance. The implications hit Zethara like a physical blow. You're not just converting individual vessels. You're offering the entire Cathari collective an alternative to their current existence. Admiral Chen nodded gravely. The Cathari became a galactic threat because their evolutionary strategy was consumption without symbiosis. But every biological system requires balance. We're offering them a chance to evolve beyond their current limitations. And if they refuse, then we'll demonstrate why Earth's evolutionary strategy has been more successful, Lieutenant Torres said, her voice carrying undertones that made the bioship's hull shimmer with patterns of light. But I don't think they'll refuse. Deep down, every biological system recognizes when it encounters a superior adaptation. Admiral Chen gestured toward the chamber's displays, which showed real-time feeds from across the system. Everywhere, human-guided bioships were engaging in activities that looked like education rather than conquest. Cathari vessels were being taught new coordination patterns, introduced to technological enhancements, and gradually incorporated into hybrid fleets that retained their biological advantages while gaining strategic capabilities. This is the prototype phase, he explained. We're learning how to integrate Cathari biology with human technology on a small scale, but the real test comes when we take this to their core systems. Zethara felt her understanding of warfare shifting once again. You're planning to convert the entire Cathari collective? We're planning to offer them a better evolutionary path, Dr. Rail. Chen corrected. Conversion implies force. What we're offering is symbiotic evolution, a chance for both species to become something greater than either could achieve alone. The scale of what the humans were proposing was breathtaking. Not conquest, not even victory in any traditional sense, but the transformation of an entire species from a galactic threat into a partner in cosmic development. The Council needs to understand, Admiral Chen continued, that this approach requires resources and coordination on a massive scale. We can provide the technological framework and the integration expertise, but we need Council support for the logistics of reaching every Cathari-controlled system simultaneously. Why simultaneously? Zethara asked. Because the Cathari collective learns, Lieutenant Torres answered, her bioship systems pulsing with what seemed like excitement. If we approach their systems piecemeal, they'll adapt countermeasures. But if we offer symbiotic partnership to the entire collective at once, they'll have to evaluate it as a species-wide evolutionary opportunity. The audacity of it was staggering. The humans weren't just proposing to end the war, they were suggesting the transformation of the galaxy's most dangerous species into its most powerful ally. What do you need from the Council? Zethara asked, knowing that her next words would commit her species to either the most ambitious cooperation in galactic history or the most spectacular failure. Admiral Chen smiled, but his expression was serious. We need every Council species to contribute their unique capabilities to a coordinated offensive that will reach 47 Cathari systems within a 72-hour window. But more than that, we need Council species willing to volunteer for integration training. Integration training? Dr. Chen stepped forward. The symbiotic process we've developed works best when multiple species are involved. Human creativity, Cathari adaptability, plus the unique capabilities of other species. Enhanced computational power from the Vexian collective consciousness, quantum navigation from crystalline hegemony vessels, biological expertise from the Hive Confederacy. The scope was overwhelming, but Zethara was beginning to understand the human approach. They didn't see species differences as obstacles to overcome, but as resources to be combined in novel ways. "You're proposing to create a truly multi-species integrated fleet," she realized. "We're proposing to create the future of galactic civilization," Admiral Chen replied. "A model where species cooperation isn't limited to treaties and trade agreements, but extends to actual biological and technological integration." Lieutenant Torres' bioship pulsed with patterns that Zethara's translator couldn't interpret, but somehow she understood the meaning anyway: possibility, hope, and the promise of transformation. "The risks are enormous," Zethara said, though she knew her objection was more procedural than substantial. "So are the rewards," Dr. Chen replied. "Consider what we could accomplish with Cathari biological technology, guided by human creativity and enhanced by the best capabilities of every council species. Diseases that adapt to any treatment could be cured. Environmental restoration could happen at unprecedented speeds. Even space travel could be revolutionized by bioships that grow and adapt to the needs of their missions." Admiral Chen activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it could be, not a collection of separate species maintaining careful balance, but an integrated system where biological and technological evolution proceeded hand in hand. "This is what we're really fighting for," he said. "Not just victory over the Cathari, but the next stage of galactic evolution. The question is whether the Council species are ready to take that step." Zethara looked at the display, then at Lieutenant Torres merged seamlessly with her bioship, then at the human leaders who spoke of transforming their greatest enemies into allies as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. "I'll need to consult with the Council," she said finally. "Of course. But Commander, remember that the Cathari Collective is also evolving. Every day we delay gives them more time to develop countermeasures to our approach. The window for peaceful transformation is limited." As if summoned by his words, alarms began sounding throughout the flagship. Nellara's voice crackled over the emergency channels. "All ships, we're detecting massive Cathari movement from the inner systems. This is larger than anything we've seen before." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but Zethara noticed that Lieutenant Torres's bioship began resonating with new harmonic patterns. "How large?" Admiral Chen asked calmly. "Preliminary counts suggest over 10,000 vessels," came the reply. "They're moving in perfect coordination, and the biosignatures are different. These aren't the same configurations we encountered before." Dr. Chen was already pulling up sensor data on her portable display. "They've adapted faster than we projected. These new bioships show modifications designed specifically to counter our integration techniques." Zethara felt the familiar chill of facing an adaptive enemy, but Admiral Chen seemed almost pleased by the development. "Expected and anticipated," he said. "Lieutenant Torres, what's your bioship telling you about these new configurations?" The young pilot's expression grew distant as she communed with her vessel. "They're heavily armored against external intrusion, both technological and biological. But the collective communication protocols are more complex than before. They're trying to coordinate at a level that requires enormous processing power, which means," Lieutenant Torres smiled, and for a moment she looked terrifyingly similar to her admiral. "Which means they're vulnerable to coordination disruption. They've made themselves more dependent on collective communication to maintain their enhanced capabilities." Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. "And how do we disrupt their coordination?" "By offering them something better," Lieutenant Torres replied. "A communication system based on partnership rather than hierarchy. They won't be able to resist it." Zethara watched this exchange with growing amazement. The humans weren't dismayed by enemy adaptation. They were using it as an opportunity to refine their own approach. "Commander," Admiral Chen turned to her. "This is the moment when you decide. We can demonstrate our integration techniques on this new Cathari force, showing the Council exactly what we're proposing. But we'll need Council fleet coordination to make it work on the scale necessary." "You want to turn the incoming attack into a recruitment opportunity?" Zethara asked. "We want to turn it into the first step toward galactic transformation," Dr. Chen replied. "But only if the Council is ready to trust us with their ships, their crews, and their future." Outside the viewport, space was filling with the ominous shapes of evolved Cathari bioships, their new configurations bristling with adaptations designed to resist human integration techniques. But instead of fear, Zethara felt something she couldn't have imagined a week ago. Curiosity about what the humans would do next. "What do you need from us?" she asked. Admiral Chen's smile was radiant with possibility. "Everything you've got, Commander, and faith that when this is over, the galaxy will never need to fear extinction-level threats again." As the Council fleet moved to support the human vessels, Zathara realized she was about to witness either the birth of a new kind of galactic civilization or the most ambitious failure in recorded history. Either way, it would be the most important battle she'd ever fought. The Cathari Collective was about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an adaptive one, and discovered that sometimes the best solution was to become something entirely new together. The moment the Cathari superfleet entered engagement range, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Zathara had participated in dozens of major battles, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of 10,000 evolved bioships moving with the terrifying precision of a single vast organism. These weren't the chaotic swarms they had faced before. This was the Cathari Collective operating at maximum efficiency. Their coordination patterns are unprecedented, Nelara reported from her position aboard the Eternal Vigilance. They're sharing sensory data, tactical processing, and decision-making across the entire fleet instantaneously. Dr. Chen, monitoring the engagement from her position aboard a converted bioship that served as her mobile laboratory, added her analysis. The collective has evolved beyond our initial projections. They're not just coordinating. They're thinking as a unified entity, spanning thousands of vessels. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the tactical chatter with characteristic calm. All Council vessels maintain formation at designated coordinates. This is about to become a very different kind of battle. Zathara watched from her command station as the human fleet began its response. Instead of the aggressive formation she expected, the hybrid human Cathari vessels were arranging themselves in what looked almost like a welcoming formation, not defensive, but open, inviting. Admiral, Vexen's scales shifted to deep purple, indicating extreme confusion. The humans aren't preparing for combat. Are they broadcasting? Indeed. The human bioships had begun emanating the harmonic communication patterns that Lieutenant Torres had demonstrated, but this wasn't the simple partnership offering they had used on individual vessels. This was something far more complex, a symphony of biological and technological voices speaking in perfect harmony. What are they saying? Zathara demanded. Dr. Chen's voice carried wonder and fear in equal measure. They're speaking to the collective as a whole, not offering partnership to individual ships, but proposing symbiosis to the entire Cathari species. The effect on the approaching biofleet was immediate and startling. The perfect coordination that had defined their approach began to falter. Individual vessels started deviating from formation as they responded to the human broadcast. Some moved closer, others held position, but all were clearly struggling with information they had never encountered before. The collective consciousness is experiencing something like cognitive dissonance, Lieutenant Torres reported, her bioship pulsing with excited patterns. They're receiving an offer that doesn't fit any category in their evolutionary experience. Admiral Chen's image appeared on screens throughout the combined fleet. All vessels, you are witnessing the most important moment in galactic history. What happens in the next few minutes will determine whether this galaxy faces a future of endless warfare or unprecedented cooperation. The Cathari superfleet had stopped its advance entirely. Thousands of bioships hung in space, their organic hulls rippling with patterns of light that spoke of intense internal activity. The collective was debating with itself on a scale never before witnessed. They're running evolutionary simulations, Dr. Chen announced with barely contained excitement. The collective is modeling what would happen if they accepted human symbiosis versus what would happen if they continued their current expansion strategy. And what are those simulations showing them? Zathara asked. Lieutenant Torres's laugh was harmonized by her bioship's resonant frequencies. That expansion through consumption eventually leads to stagnation and extinction, but cooperation through symbiosis leads to unlimited growth potential. The human broadcast intensified, and now Zathara could see that it wasn't just communication. It was demonstration. The hybrid bioships were showing the collective what symbiotic partnership looked like in practice. Human creativity combined with Cathari adaptability, technological precision merged with biological flexibility, individual innovation balanced with collective coordination. They're not just telling the collective what partnership could achieve, Zathara realized. They're showing them what it has already achieved. The response from the Cathari fleet was unlike anything in reported military history. Instead of attacking or retreating, the bioships began to change. Their weapon systems retracted, their aggressive configurations shifted to more neutral forms, and their coordination patterns evolved from the rigid hierarchy of conquest to something more resembling a discussion between equals. First contact protocols are being established, Nelara reported, her voice filled with awe. Individual Cathari vessels are requesting direct communication with human bioships. What followed was the most complex negotiation in galactic history, conducted through harmonics, biochemical signals, and technological interfaces that had been improvised in real time. Zathara watched as human pilots worked with their bioship partners to establish communication protocols with Cathari vessels that had never experienced voluntary cooperation. The breakthrough came when one of the larger Cathari bioships, clearly a command vessel for a significant portion of the fleet, established stable communication with Lieutenant Torres' hybrid ship. The conversation that followed was broadcast to both fleets, translated through multiple layers of technological and biological interpretation. The Cathari collective consciousness spoke with a voice that was simultaneously individual and multitudinous, a harmony of thousands of bioships thinking in unison. We acknowledge your proposal, but we must understand. You offer symbiosis where we have known only consumption. How do you ensure that partnership does not become subjugation? Lieutenant Torres responded, her words carried by her bioship's living systems and translated into concepts that the collective could understand, because true symbiosis makes both partners stronger. Subjugation weakens the relationship by limiting the contributions of one partner. We offer growth through cooperation, not dominance through control. Demonstrate, came the collective response. What happened next redefined Zethara's understanding of possibility. Lieutenant Torres's bioship began to merge, not physically, but informationally and biochemically, with the Cathari command vessel. The process was visible to both fleets as streams of light passed between the ships, carrying data, emotions, memories, and capabilities. For several minutes, the two vessels existed as a single entity, their crews experiencing true symbiosis on a scale that encompassed both biological and technological evolution. When they separated, both ships had been fundamentally changed. The Cathari command vessel now pulsed with patterns that incorporated human mathematical concepts and technological solutions. But more importantly, its crew had experienced what it meant to think as individuals within a collective framework, rather than simply as extensions of a larger organism. Lieutenant Torres' ship showed complementary changes. Her bioship had gained enhanced adaptive capabilities and an intuitive understanding of biological systems that no human technology could have provided. But the human crew retained their individual personalities and creative capabilities. This is true symbiosis, the collective consciousness announced, and its voice now carried harmonics that hadn't been present before, individual notes within the collective harmony. We understand now why this approach succeeds where consumption fails. Both partners become more than they were, rather than one consuming the other. Admiral Chen's voice carried quiet satisfaction. The question now is whether this understanding can be extended to all Cathari vessels and all Council species. Are you prepared to undergo evolutionary transformation on a galactic scale? The collective's response was immediate and unanimous. We are prepared. But this transformation must be voluntary for all participants. We will not force evolution any more than you will force cooperation. What followed was the most ambitious logistics operation in galactic history. The combined human Cathari fleet, now working in true partnership, began establishing what they called transformation centers throughout the system. Council vessels that volunteered for the process were paired with Cathari bioships, creating hybrid vessels that combined the unique capabilities of multiple species. Zathara found herself aboard one such hybrid vessel, her crystalline physiology interfacing with Cathari biosystems while human technology provided the integration framework. The experience was beyond description, like learning to think with organs she had never possessed while retaining all her original capabilities. The sensory input is extraordinary, she reported to the fleet. I can feel the gravitational currents of the system, sense the electromagnetic signatures of every ship, and process tactical information at speeds that would have been impossible before. But the individual transformations were only the beginning. Dr. Chen had been coordinating with Cathari bioengineers to develop what they called fleet consciousness, a communication and coordination system that allowed voluntary sharing of information and capabilities while preserving individual autonomy. The first test of fleet consciousness came when long-range sensors detected the arrival of another force, Cathari vessels from distant systems that had not been part of the transformation process. These newcomers represented the old collective consciousness, driven by consumption and expansion, unaware of the evolutionary breakthrough that had occurred. Incoming force consists of approximately 1,500 bioships, Nellara reported. They're broadcasting standard Cathari dominant signals and moving in traditional attack formations. Admiral Chen's response was calm but decisive. All vessels prepare for peaceful contact protocols. We're going to offer them the same choice we offered their siblings. The battle that followed wasn't a battle at all. but rather a demonstration of the gulf between two evolutionary strategies. The traditional Cathari force attacked with all the ferocity and coordination that had made them the galaxy's greatest threat. But they found themselves facing an enemy that adapted faster than they could attack, that turned their own weapons into tools for communication, and that responded to aggression with offers of partnership. The key breakthrough came when the transformed Cathari vessels began communicating with their unchanged cousins in biological harmonics that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to evolutionary instinct. They weren't arguing for cooperation, they were demonstrating its superiority through every action they took. Within hours, the attacking force had been completely transformed, not conquered, not defeated, but evolved into something greater than they had been before. The process was spreading geometrically as each transformed vessel became capable of guiding others through the same evolutionary leap. This is how it will happen throughout the galaxy. Dr. Chen explained to the assembled fleet commanders. Each transformation center becomes a node for further transformation. The process will spread from system to system, not through conquest but through demonstration of superior evolutionary strategy. The implications were staggering. In a matter of weeks, the galaxy's greatest threat would become its greatest asset. Cathari adaptability, combined with human creativity and the unique capabilities of dozens of council species, would create a civilization capable of addressing challenges that no single species could handle alone. What about resistance? Zathara asked. Surely some Cathari installations will refuse transformation? Lieutenant Torres, now serving as the primary interface between human and Cathari consciousness, smiled with confidence that was reinforced by her bioship's harmonious patterns. Resistance becomes impossible once they understand what they're refusing. This isn't about changing who they are, it's about becoming more than they ever imagined possible. Admiral Chen activated a galactic display that showed the projected spread of transformation across Cathari space. Conservative estimates suggest complete transformation within 6 standard months. Optimistic projections put it at 12 weeks. And after transformation is complete? Sefara asked. Dr. Chen's answer redefined the scope of galactic ambition. We begin addressing the real challenges. There are regions of dark matter that no single species can explore safely. There are phenomena at galactic core that require capabilities we don't currently possess. There are neighboring galaxies that may contain threats or opportunities we can't imagine. You're talking about expansion beyond our galaxy? We're talking about evolution beyond current limitations, Admiral Chen replied. The symbiotic principles that have transformed the Cathari can be applied to any challenge. Biological adaptation combined with technological innovation, individual creativity balanced with collective coordination, species cooperation elevated to true symbiosis. The transformation of the Proxima system was complete within 72 hours. Where there had once been a desperate battle between incompatible evolutionary strategies, there was now a thriving center of interspecies cooperation that served as a model for galactic civilization. Zathora stood on the observation deck of her transformed vessel, watching as hybrid bioships moved through space with grace that combined organic flow with technological precision. Crews of multiple species worked together not through careful protocol and diplomatic necessity, but through genuine symbiotic partnership that made each individual more capable while strengthening the collective. Final report to Council Headquarters, she dictated to her communications officer. The threat posed by the Cathari Collective has been permanently resolved through evolutionary transformation rather than military victory. The process of symbiotic integration has begun and is expected to encompass all intelligent species within the galaxy. She paused, searching for words adequate to the magnitude of what she had witnessed. Recommendation. Council species should prepare for voluntary transformation to hybrid civilization status. The future of galactic development will be defined by cooperation rather than competition, symbiosis rather than dominance, and shared evolution rather than individual advancement. Admiral Chen's image appeared on her personal communication screen. Commander, we're receiving transformation requests from 17 Council species and 43 Cathari systems. The process is accelerating beyond all projections. Any problems with the integration? None that can't be resolved through creative cooperation. Admiral Chen replied, his expression carrying the quiet satisfaction of someone who had seen the impossible become inevitable. It turns out that when species are offered the chance to become more than they are while remaining who they are, resistance becomes irrelevant. Dr. Chen appeared beside her brother, her scientific excitement barely contained. The evolutionary pressure towards symbiosis is becoming self-reinforcing. Each successful integration makes the next integration easier and more effective. We're witnessing speciation at a galactic scale. And humanity's role in this transformation? Admiral Chen's smile carried echoes of the humanity that had first emerged from a death world where everything tried to kill everything else, and had learned to turn that pressure into strength. We're doing what we've always done, adapting to new challenges and helping others do the same. The only difference is that now the challenges are galactic in scale. Lieutenant Torres's voice joined the conversation from her bioship, carrying harmonics that represented the future of interspecies communication. The transformation is just beginning. When every species in the galaxy can share capabilities while maintaining identity, when every challenge can be addressed through cooperative evolution, when every threat becomes an opportunity for growth, that's when we'll see what galactic civilization can really achieve. Zethara looked out at space filled with vessels that embodied the future, bioships that grew and adapted, technological marvels that evolved in real time, crews that thought together while remaining individually creative. The galaxy would never again face extinction-level threats because every species would be capable of evolutionary response to any challenge. They asked for reinforcements, she said quietly, remembering the desperate message that had brought humanity to their aid. What we got was evolution itself. Admiral Chen's final transmission carried the weight of transformation accomplished and challenges yet to come. The galaxy is safe, Commander. But more than that, it's ready for whatever comes next. When the next impossible threat appears, we'll adapt to meet it. When the next evolutionary pressure emerges, we'll grow to encompass it. That's what the galaxy does now. It evolves. In the months that followed, the transformation continued exactly as projected. Species after species chose voluntary symbiosis over individual limitation. Challenges that had seemed insurmountable, pandemic diseases, environmental collapse, resource depletion, technological stagnation, became opportunities for cooperative evolution. The Kithari Collective, once the galaxy's greatest threat, became its greatest gift. Their biological adaptability, combined with human creativity and the unique capabilities of every other species, created a civilization that could literally grow to meet any challenge. And in the deep reaches of space, where ancient threats slumbered and future challenges waited, the galaxy continued its greatest adventure. The endless evolution of intelligence, cooperation, and the determination to turn every obstacle into an opportunity for becoming something greater. The war was over. Evolution had begun. And somewhere in the vast network of hybrid bioships that now connected every system in the galaxy, humanity's voice could still be heard, teaching the ancient lesson they had learned on a death world where everything tried to kill them. When faced with something that seems impossible to survive, the answer isn't to fight harder, it's to become something that makes the impossible irrelevant. The galaxy had learned to evolve, and it would never stop growing. They asked for reinforcements. What arrived was the Deadliest Deathworlder Armada. HFY Sci-Fi Story.